Nearly 20 years ago, Ruby made a remarkable discovery in the attic of her late parents' house. The leather suitcase her mother carried out of Austria in the 1930s. Inside were hundreds of documents and photographs, clues to a history her parents barely spoke of.
They fled from Vienna, Austria, from the Nazis, because they were Jewish. I don't think they had a choice. So I found all these pictures, but I don't know who they are. Nobody ever mentioned it. I'd like to find out who they were. I found some letters. Who wrote these? It says, Meine Liebe, which is my dear, and then it's signed Ella and Salo. I don't know who they are. Oh, look, here she is, my mother. She had hysteria, which I don't know if they call it that anymore, but, you know, screaming. She would come up with lines like, run with the hyenas, run. And when you go to bed with dogs, you wake up with fleas. And then suddenly she would shout, Toscanini. It was the language, was nuts. This is my dad. My dad was handsome and violent. You know, my dad would chase me with a belt and say, how dare you speak to your mother like that? Meanwhile, he was using it on her. My dad loved America, but my mother never adjusted. Coming to America was not my mom's idea of success, and then really didn't like my dad, because he was as she called him, a torturer. Obviously, they must have had a hideous relationship. So they assumed I was insane. So I was sent to shrinks all the time who had no idea. A few of them said, your mother is a basket case. Seriously, something wasn't right. But I didn't know as a kid. I thought everybody had those parents. But was it in their genes? Or was it something that happened to them?
An only child, Ruby was told fragmentary stories about her parents' past.
I know that the Nazis came to put my dad in prison at one point, and these are the postcards. I think when my dad was in jail, my mom said, one of the Nazis who really liked my mom, he'd sneak him in. I really would like to go to Austria. I would like to know how they got out or why they got out. Were they scared? Were they told to get out? I don't know.
Ruby's parents, Edmund Vax and Berta Goldman, both came from Vienna. Now Ruby is traveling there to uncover their story.
I have no feeling of being Jewish. It wasn't really mentioned a lot. I don't even watch films about the Holocaust.
Ruby reads little German and will need help to decipher the documents and photographs from her mother's suitcase.
These are 1938. I don't really know how difficult it was to be a Jew here at that particular time. My dad told me he stowed away on a ship that was going to America. I don't know if that's really true. But they did get him and put him in prison. But I have no idea what he was doing in prison. It didn't seem too hard. He did say it was a big adventure. I think he mentioned being in charge of aerobics. I have the address of the prison here. It's Rotzalande Polizei Fangerhaus.
Ruby has come to the address on her postcard, the police jail where her father was held, to see if she can discover how he ended up in prison. She has arranged to meet historian Dr. Eleanor Lappin-Eppel.
Hello.
Hello, hi Ruby.
Hi.
I'm Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor.
This is the prison where your father was kept.
Oh, for how long?
2 months at least. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened to your father, but let's go to a coffee house.
Okay.
Yes?
All right. These are letters I found in the attic in my parents' suitcase when they left Vienna, but I can't actually read them.
Now, this letter was written by your mother to your father while he was in prison.
What year are we?
You see, this is in 1938. When you look at these dates, this is about 6-7 weeks after the invasion.
On the 12th of March 1938, the Nazis seized power in Austria. 2 days later, Adolf Hitler made a triumphant entry into Vienna, greeted by vast, cheering crowds. Even before he arrived, the attacks on Viennese Jews had begun.
As soon as the Nazis entered Austria, there was an incredible outburst of violence by Austrian Nazis.
Just from literally one day to the next. There was no warning of that.
And one day, violence started right away. They really had the feeling the Germans are here, and now the Jews will get it. And they assaulted Jews, they humiliated them, they beat them up. And what was even worse was that it was not safe for them at home either. Neighbors or complete strangers would come to the house and rob them. Or even sometimes Jews were kicked out of their apartments.
And the Jews weren't expecting that.
No.
Why was my dad put in prison?
Your father was arrested because he was a Jew. And there was no good reason. I have a proof here. I have the translation of one of the cards your mother wrote. Please read the translation.
This is a translation of this?
Yes.
Dear Mundi, that was what she called him. I'm at yours every day, and not a minute in the day goes by without me thinking about you, with tears in my eyes. I hope that you are fairly well and that I will see you again soon. You will probably be allowed to leave soon. You haven't done anything after all. When you come, you will be getting something nice to eat. What did they do to him in the prison? He said he taught aerobics.
Oh, come on. The Jewish prisoners were tortured. And one of the things they had to do was so-called gymnastics, like jumping through the room on your, with your knees bent, yes, climbing up walls, beating each other. And whenever they refused, they refused to do this, they were beaten by their guards.
But my dad said he was leading the class.
Maybe they forced him to jump ahead of all of the others. He was a young man. I'm sure that he was in better physical shape than a 65-year-old old man who also had to jump. So
it was torture? I thought
it was torture and humiliation. Look, there were people jumping out of the window, committing suicide, because it was just unbearable what went on there.
So my dad, how did he actually get out of prison?
Here's a letter that explains how he got out.
It's from my dad.
Yeah.
Dear Minister, I've been in prison for 2 months in Vienna by the Gestapo. After being freed, I had to sign a document that I would immediately leave the country. Why did he sign the document?
If he didn't leave Austria in time, the punishment was being sent to Dachau straight away. Dachau was a concentration camp with terrible brutality. As long as your father was in prison here, he was under threat of being deported to Dachau.
Do you think he was scared?
They wanted to scare the Jews and to get them to leave the country as soon as possible. So at this time, if he could prove that he can leave the country right away or in the near future, he would be released.
Ruby's father was freed by July 1938. The Nazi policy was to force as many Jews as possible to leave Austria. But fearing a flood of refugees, many countries restricted entry. Ruby's father was one of the lucky ones. He obtained a visa to go to Belgium. Before he left Vienna, he was able to return home and hastily marry Ruby's mother, Bertha.
So there's one more thing that I think might be interesting for you.
Yeah.
And that's the address where your father and his family lived. He's living in the 3rd district,
Yeah.
Weisgerberlände 10. And he's a dealer of intestines, a merchant of intestines.
A merchant of intestines. That's almost Shakespearean.
Yes.
The merchant of intestines.
Yes.
First of all, I had no idea that my mother loved my dad. Saying she cried every day, I had no idea that they really loved each other. That's a surprise. And then my dad told me he was the aerobics coach. I didn't understand that they were being tortured. He always said I was really young, so it was an adventure. It must have been wild. Why didn't he tell me anything? What did he think my reaction would be?